Back on the Boulevard, Thursday, May 23rd. As always, here to prove to you there is no such thing as football season. We are presented by the Believe Network tonight. Just 2 weeks left in the UFL regular season, and the playoffs are already set. So we're not going to get the tiebreaker drama that we had in last year's XFL season, which honestly is a great thing for Battlehawk fans and my sleep schedule. Don't have to be here in Studio Z all night like last year, building spreadsheets and using AI to help me build algorithms to figure out exact score combinations. But that aside, there is still plenty left to play for. Home field is not yet decided in the XFL Conference. We'll lay out all the scenarios for you, from the Battlehawks clinching the entire playoffs at home, what they need to do, to San Antonio potentially still having a shot to host the playoff game in the Alamo Dome as the 1 seed. Let's go ahead and welcome in the producer, director, and owner of Studio Z, Chris Zook. Zook, something we weren't able to pull off last year is get a Seattle Sea Dragon on the show. I might have to make that up to you tonight.
You still didn't really get a Seattle Sea Dragon
this
on
counts.
the show.
This counts.
You're going to count
it?
it?
Still counts.
I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, man. It's the Battle Dragons, right?
Clearly, I'm rooting for the guy, right?
Hey, you got the same first name, too. There's a hint for you, even though I'll give it away in about 30 seconds. But
right.
Zook will love it tonight. We won't talk about the Sea Dragons with him, of course, because, nothing to talk about with them, but there is some things to talk about with our guests. On tonight's show, a name popped back up on our UFL radar this week that you may have forgotten about, and that's Chase Garbers. We're going to get into how his potential return might affect things. We also have, like we said, home field up for grabs in that XFL Conference, and St. Louis potentially without AJ McCarron again. We'll get into that and what Coach Beck said today about the status of his star quarterback. We also have Chris Payton-Jones of the St. Louis Battlehawks, the former Seattle Sea Dragon. And don't forget, guys, we still have a XFL USFL rivalry to settle. The season series is deadlocked at 7 games apiece, so a best of 3 games will decide it. It's going to come down to Birmingham, San Antonio on Saturday, DC, Memphis on Sunday, and then the UFL title game. So that should be exciting. As always, we'll give you our winners for Week 9. Just because the playoffs are locked up doesn't mean we're going to stop making you money. So drop us a like if you're with us on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If you're with us on Twitter or X, thanks for being with us. Hit us with that retweet. Let's take a quick glance, Zook, at our standings for UFL Week 9, and the playoffs are locked up. Like we said, Birmingham at 8-0. Technically the 1 seed. However, if they were to drop to 8-2 and Michigan was 8-2, and you want to know who would get the 1 seed in that case, well, Michigan would have a lot of work to do in the 4th and 5th tiebreakers. We're going to get into a strange scenario where the UFL actually had to give Birmingham a home field advantage regardless of who gets the 1 seed there, but it's safe to say they will finish at 1. Said Michigan is 6-2. Memphis and Houston are 1-7. On the XFL side, the Battlehawks holding strong as the 1 seed currently with wins over each team in the conference. San Antonio's loss to DC at 6-2 is keeping them in 2nd place currently. DC is 3-5 and eliminated from the playoffs, and the Arlington Renegades are 1-7. Speaking of those Renegades, let's lead Week 9 off at the UFL Hub in Arlington. This is an XFL Conference rematch from back in Week 2. It's the Battlehawks at the Renegades. St. Louis, the 3-point road favorite here, although they won't be traveling because they are in the Hub. This is actually the first time all season that Anthony Beck's club will get to stay home in Dallas at HQ and play in Choctaw Stadium. Total for this one is at 46. Forecast looking like 90 and windy with a slight chance of a thunderstorm, but not anything you really have to worry about. If you remember all the way back to that first weekend in April, it was the Battlehawks not only setting the spring football single game attendance record, but they gave that crowd a show. It was a game-winning field goal from Andre Schmidt, walk-off 27-24. So when we look at this one, it's a little bit different of a situation because St. Louis was at full strength with AJ McCarron back then. Now word from Anthony Beck is that AJ is progressing nicely, and he will be reactivated, but as QB2. Now, presumably, that means that Manny Wilkins, who started last week in the win against DC, will get the go again here. Regardless, I think whether it's Wilkins or maybe McCarron feels better in warmups and gets the start, I don't think that's going to happen. There's really no reason to rush him back. But regardless, it's a pretty favorable matchup for either quarterback. Renegades are a bad pass defense, ranking 7th in the league. They're straight off a thrashing by the San Antonio pass game. I think the Brahmas racked up over 300 yards on them. They had a ton of yards in the first half. They just could not stop anybody. And I think a guy like Wayne Gallman, who really showed out last week against DC, making plays on the ground. He scored a touchdown. He had a big screen pass that he took 38 yards on that last drive that set St. Louis right up on the short porch. And he made a huge tackle on special teams on a fake punt that could have given DC some momentum. So I'm thinking of Anthony McFarland last week against Arlington and how he was able to be kind of a threat as a running back and do it all through the air and on the ground. I see the same with a guy like Gallman. I'm just not sure that the Renegades have the defense here, even if it is Manny Wilkins. I mean, the Battlehawks are dropping 28 a game this year as their average. So with Wilkins, they dropped 26 still, and that was a weird box score that they had against DC because they didn't have barely 100 passing yards. And if you looked at just A versus B, you might say, oh, well, Team B, which would have been DC, won that game in the box score. Well, it didn't matter because St. Louis was very efficient in the red zone, and Wilkins made enough plays to win them that game, and he also protected the ball, right? That was the biggest thing, no turnovers. So this Renegade defense is limping. They're down a couple defensive backs on the injury report. This is a short week for them. Remember, flipping around now, playing the first game of the week on Saturday. Last week they played the final game of the week on Sunday. So that's a real short week. And really every team has had major success running the ball against the Renegades defense. If you remember back in week 2 from the game we're showing you now, Mateo Durant, who's on the IR now, had the breakout game going over 100 yards against this defense. Like I said, Wayne Gallman might be that guy to step up and do that this week. They seem to be getting Wayne a lot more involved lately, and I'm not selling stock on Jacob Sailors yet, but I think this is a good spot for Gallman. I think Coach Beck was very pleased with his performance. But again, the keys to this offense are in the hands of Manny Wilkins, which is very interesting, not something that many people expected to happen down the stretch here. And, here we are. If you're a Battlehawks fan trying to lock up home field this week and you don't have your starting quarterback, and it's like, last year you had some stress at the end of the season trying to figure out, are we in, are we out? Now you're in the playoffs, but of course you want to have the whole thing at home. So you're wondering, can Manny Wilkins get us there? It's also worth keeping an eye on Ja'Cour Pearson and Marcel Aitman. Both of those guys who missed last week's game. Aitman actually has COVID. I saw that on the injury report, and, I think that explains why he was still active and dressed against Birmingham but couldn't play. He might have had a late positive test there. So Pearson as well dealing with an ankle. Both of those guys back and practicing in a limited fashion this week. So I do give a slight edge to the Battlehawks offense. And remember, the Renegades have struggled with mobile quarterbacks. That's the key here. You remember when Arlington played against Jordan Ta'amu? You could drive a Mack truck down the middle of the field. There was no spy. And even like a guy like Danny Etling, he had a huge run against them that basically sealed the game. So they just haven't been good. And Manny Wilkins had 80 yards rushing against DC. So look for him to do it with his legs. And I give the Battlehawks offense the edge. On the other side of the ball, when you look at the Renegades offensively, I just have a feeling you're going to see some changes from Bob Stoops and Chuck Long on this side. And again, we want to refresh your memory on something, a piece of information that we heard last week that could be critical Renegades third-string quarterback Holton Ahlers, who has not been active yet this year, made a comment on his podcast last week that the coaches were giving some guys who haven't had reps the green light to play, and he even pointed to Week 10 in D.C. potentially being his opportunity. He even went as far to tell his college fan base back at East Carolina, show up to the D.C. game because I'm going to be playing. So that's some inside information that we got to use, and we got to expect Arlington to potentially shut down Luis Perez here. Again, some stats from him: over 1,800 yards passing, 12 touchdowns to 2 picks, and completing over 65% of his passes. So I don't know for sure. I would continue to monitor that situation. I'm not saying it's going to be Lindsey Scott or Ahlers. It sounds to me like it probably won't be Ahlers because they might be giving him Week 10. But maybe Lindsey Scott or a bigger role for Lindsey Scott than you would normally see with Luis Perez. Maybe some other guys who haven't seen too many snaps as well might be playing on the Renegades offense. You think about a receiver like Lawan Winningham or a Caleb Vander Esch, who have been kind of buried on the depth chart, right? Do those guys see some action? For tight end, Seth Green backing up Sal Cannella all season. That'll be something to keep an eye on. And that's not a good recipe against a really good Battlehawks defense who is going to have their best players on the field because they have something to play for. I think the St. Louis defense will play a lot better than they did back in Week 2. Actually, back in Week 2, the Battlehawks surrendered the most passing yards they have all season to Luis Perez and the Arlington offense, even more than they gave up, believe it or not, against Martinez and Birmingham. So they have to play better this time around. A couple of injury notes for Donnie Abraham's defense here. Battlehawks actually had 2 concussions to starters on that side of the ball against DC. Austin Fiolu, who's been in and out of the lineup all year at nose tackle, and Lavert Hill, who is one of their shutdown corners. So keep an eye on that. I do think they have enough depth to overcome some of the injuries. I just, the line is 3. I could understand why with AJ being out and the sports books being super high on Arlington all season. But I don't think the odds makers have adjusted to the Renegades quite like we have. You cannot count on this team. This team is 2-6 against the spread. And if you watch Springball Boulevard, you know that because it's painful for us every week to talk about this team and betting on this team in a spot that might look good, and then they let you down. So they just don't cover as an underdog. Everybody overreacted to that blowout of Memphis, thinking here's the Renegades, they're back, and they only last week had 65 yards on the ground. So Davion Smith was a non-factor. He actually got stuffed on a 4th and inches. He's right back to his normal self with like 2.1 yards a carry. So you can't look at that Memphis film and think that this is a team that's all of a sudden going to shock the world. Do they have it in them? They do if they play like they did against Memphis. But I don't know. The Battlehawks defense is dominating. They came up with 2 picks last week that really changed the game. They don't give up many passing touchdowns. And I expect Arlington to really struggle to get to 20 here. So St. Louis is the pick for me here, Zook. I lean them to cover, and I'm not sure if you feel the same way. I just can't lock it in without AJ because I don't think Manny Wilkins is a capable passer yet.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, he's dangerous with those legs. We talked about Sunday how fast he is. And we talked about Arlington being the Swiss cheese defense.
Yeah.
St. Louis is clearly better on both sides of the ball. And I think they do cover. And I'll be careful with this. I don't think even with AJ, the line would change that much. I mean, they're still winning straight up, right?
Yeah, I think if AJ was the starter, it'd probably be like a 5.5 or 6. I think we'd see a similar movement that we did last week. It's interesting because it's almost like a chess match. On one end, you have Manny Wilkins, but on the other end, how much are we putting into what Holton Ahlers said about the staff giving some other guys reps? Because it would make sense to do that for Arlington at this point in the season.
Sure. I mean, I just don't see – I think AJ doesn't see the field unless it's close in the end.
Yeah.
And they want to bring him.
Even that's tough.
He needs to rest. He really does. I just don't think we're going to see him. But
Yeah, I
he's
guess
clearly healthy enough to be QB2, right?
Yeah, I'm more interested. I think it's a pretty big lock that Manny Wilkins will start after what Coach Beck said. But I'm more interested if Luis Perez is going to start this game, or if you're going to see Lindsey Scott Jr. out there all of a sudden and think, wait a second.
Yeah.
So if you're going to take Arlington +3, first of all, you're a maniac. Second of all, make sure you know who the quarterback is, because that could be a problem.
What is it? +3? Was the odds on that?
You can get 150 on the money line, I think. So yeah,
Not worth it.
No, not at all.
Maybe like +400.
Odds makers, we figured out where they are in Arlington. They're way higher than they should be every single week. They did not cover against San Antonio either. Moving on to Saturday afternoon, this is one of 3 games in the Lone Star State this weekend, and really the best game on the slate by far this weekend. I think some of you are sleeping on this matchup, including the odds makers. It's the unbeaten Stallions and the Brahmas. Birmingham is an 8.5-point road favorite here. The total also pretty low for 2 good offenses at 44. Forecast is indoors with a chance of the end of the Birmingham streak. So if the Stallions aren't careful with this very sneaky spot, they might lose their streak. How could that happen? So let's talk about the news of the week first for San Antonio. Chase Garber's off the IR and back practicing with the team. Now, in reading between the lines on Wade Phillips' media availabilities and his Wednesdays with Wade and all that, again, doubling down on Quentin Dormady and putting some faith in his gunslinger, and also seeing some social clips from the Brahmas this week indicating Dormady bringing the huddle together, giving some pre-practice speeches. So he looks to be QB1 still, and I understand, just put Garbers back in practice. So this might be more of a long-term storyline where Garbers, needs a week or two, and then maybe he comes back for the playoffs or whatever. But I think it's pretty big here. That's notable news that Chase Garbers is back at practice. And really, it's the theme of the season for Wade Phillips and the Brahmas. They were ravaged with injuries early. Now they're getting just about everybody back. They're getting healthy at the right time. And, I mean, you think about it. Like I said, Chase Garbers, they got Anthony McFarland back last week. He goes off. He was their day one starting running back, clearly made a difference. They get 2 offensive line starters back. One of them, Alex Millette, who some of you remember from back in week 1, caught a touchdown pass at center. And even defensively, you get potentially Darius Phillips, your top corner, back. He's in practice this week. So this is a good time for this playoff run to start shaping up for San Antonio. But they're going to have to capitalize on getting this talent back against the back-to-back champs. It won't be easy. How can San Antonio do it? To me, it's pretty simple. You got to utilize your speed here. Last week, we saw some glaring holes in that Birmingham defense that Houston was able to take advantage of, and it was really unlike Birmingham. And you look at that game and you say, okay, defensive coordinator John Chavis was out with an illness. We don't know the status of him right now, certainly wishing him the best, and we want Birmingham to be at their best because that's what's good for business. That definitely made a difference with Houston giving up 20-plus, I think, for the first time all season. Well, they did it against St. Louis as well, but they actually gave even more up to Houston last week. So, like I said on Sunday's show, I'm not willing to crucify the Birmingham defense for that, but it is something that San Antonio is certainly looking at on film. When you look at Birmingham's defense, to me it's the linebacking core that is just full of studs, has really been the anchor. They make the big plays that they need to make in clutch moments. But if you're San Antonio, think about it. You got guys like McFarland lighting it up, John Lovett as kind of a thunder and lightning type deal with McFarland. Then you got Jontre Kirkland leading the league in targets. Cody Latimer starting to show out. So even if Chase Garbers isn't ready this week, I'm pretty confident they can score on the Birmingham defense with Quentin Dormady. One thing that disappoints me when it comes to AJ Smith and the Brahmas offense is the consistency. If you watch the Brahmas, they seem to disappear for long periods of games. And, last week, you're just waiting for them to put Arlington away in the second half. They couldn't do it. They didn't score a single point. And some of that was on Ryan Santoso, who missed 2 chip shot field goals down the stretch. But you got to do better than that. Even 2 weeks ago against Houston, they couldn't put the Roughnecks away late in that one. They needed a sort of a miracle situation at the end. So they've got to start sustaining drives. But I know any A.J. Smith offense has one in them to be explosive, and I'm counting on them to get 24 to 28 points on the board against Birmingham. So I give a slight edge to this offense, but they got to be better on third down. They are just 36% on third down this year. You've got to do better. Got to get closer to 50. Let's look at the Birmingham offense now up against the Brahmas defense. A hell of a matchup. This is going to be the biggest test that San Antonio's defense has faced thus far since, week 3 against the Battlehawks. And they didn't pass that one. They gave up 31 to AJ McCarron and co. And they were a little banged up sort of at the midseason point there. And, even in the loss that they took against DC, they were missing their top 3 corners. The D-line has been shaken up at points. And really, the heartbeat of this defense for San Antonio has been the linebackers. And when you're going against a guy like Adrian Martinez, that's important. AJ McCarron said himself, I like playing against San Antonio's linebackers because I feel a raised level of competition. Well, that's going to be Adrian Martinez this week. Plus, for the Brahmas, a guy like Jordan Mosley at safety is leading the UFL in tackles. So you could look at that one of 2 ways. You don't really want your safety maybe leading in tackles because that means a lot of people are getting to the second level of defense. But if you watch Mosley on film, it's not the case. He's flying up and he's playing run defense and he's stopping guys in the gap and he's looking real good. So I don't know. Even with those guys, I don't see how you hold Birmingham to under 30. I mean, you could point to the DC game. The defenders were able to hold Birmingham to under 30, but it took, an hour and a half rain delay to do that. And I don't think, Adrian Martinez didn't even start that night. So it's going to be tough for anybody to slow this offense, even a guy like Devontae Beckett, who has 8 TFLs and 2 forced fumbles. I think the streak probably means more to Birmingham than we even realize. The narrative surrounding this game is going to be, it's all about San Antonio. And I'm sure the broadcast will come on and say, Brahmas, this is your chance. You got to host a win. And the win against St. Louis week 10, you'll have a chance to host the XFL Conference Championship. But the biggest storyline in spring football is still this streak until we learn otherwise. I mean, you heard C.J. Johnson. He called Skip Holtz the king of spring, and that matters. They're at 15 straight right now, and they're not going to play the load management game where they start resting their starters when they got this streak on the line, on the road. But Birmingham, think about it. Birmingham 8-0, right? Clear-cut best team in the league. They're the favorites to win it all. So they have everything going for them right now except one thing, and that's their record against the spread. They're not perfect ATS. They did not cover in 3 of their last 4 games. They're 8-point favorites against DC, won by 2. 4.5-point favorites against St. Louis, won by 4. 16-point favorite last week against Houston, win by 7. And they were missing John Chavis. And they did have the rain delay, right? And it was only a 0.5 point against St. Louis. But those are not covers. Again, disclaimer, this is not a criticism of the Birmingham Stallions. The team doesn't care about any of that. They could care less about being against the spread. I'm not criticizing Birmingham. I'm criticizing the odds makers for clearly overrating this team again. That's what's happening here. And that matters if you want to make money watching the UFL. So they're not 8.5 points better than the Brahmas. This line should be closer to 5.5. And it's the number 1 scoring offense with the Stallions against the number 1 scoring defense in San Antonio. So you can't tell me it's 8.5. That's a huge number in football. I think we're in for a treat, guys. This is going to be a one-score game. Skip Holtz, Wade Phillips, you got some of the best speed and athleticism in the UFL on the field. So get ready for some fireworks. I'm going to call for a 32-26 type of game here, but Birmingham is going to be the pick for me. I cannot wait, Zook, to see Adrian Martinez against these linebackers like Jordan Williams and Tavante Beckett. Will somebody finally be able to hold Martinez under his rushing?
Yeah, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
Because he just glides.
Right.
Doesn't look like he even has any effort when he runs. We talked about that plenty of times.
Yeah.
I mean, my pick, I'm taking the Stallions. I was gonna do my version of the pony, but I'm not ready.
I'm not giving you one this week either after what I just said. I like Birmingham to win. I don't like them to cover, but I am interested in seeing Adrian Martinez because the Brahmas lead the league in sacks, and they probably have the best front seven in the league. So
I think this is going to be a close game too.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I don't love the spread on this one. I think it's a little too much.
Yeah.
And San Antonio has something to prove. So, like, my question to you would be, if you're San Antonio and you come out and you actually beat Birmingham, does that send a message to St. Louis?
Yeah. Well, San Antonio right now is being held back by that loss to D.C., where St. Louis swept D.C. So this is their chance. Now you have a chance to get one back. Go beat a team that St. Louis lost to.
Right.
And yeah, you're right.
Not even – who cares if St. Louis lost to them? They're beating the best team in the league if that happens. Now, I don't think it's happening straight up.
Me neither.
But it's interesting because I really do think it sends a little bit of a message if they can pull it off.
Yeah.
And in a home game?
Absolutely. That will matter, and I do like the over in this one as well. I think, like I said, 32-26, 30-25, something like that.
Give me an attendance guess on this one.
Oh, boy. So this is a 2 o'clock Central kickoff on Saturday. Pretty decent time. It is going to be about 105 degrees outside, so people are going to have to get right in the stadium. They had like 12K, almost 12K last week. Let's say 12. They'll get enough to go over 12. I think 12K would be a good number for this week. So that is San Antonio, Birmingham. Before we talk to Chris Payton-Jones here, Zook, I did want to take a look at the playoff picture for a few seconds here. So I wanted to break down sort of how teams on each side might be able to lock up home field advantage starting this week, if some of you may not know. This starts on Saturday on the XFL side. If the favorites win in this situation, so Battlehawks beat the Renegades, Stallions beat the Brahmas, St. Louis in that case will lock up home field advantage regardless of Week 10's result, right? So if you're a Battlehawks fan, obviously rooting for a win, rooting against San Antonio. The reason for that is because, like we just said, San Antonio has the one conference loss against D.C., which weighs heavier than St. Louis's non-conference loss to Michigan. Now, if the Battlehawks lose to Arlington, that's when it gets interesting. Then it doesn't matter what the San Antonio Brahmas do, because in that case, St. Louis is still going to have to beat them in Week 10 in the Dome to lock up home field. So that was something that was a little unclear. The league put out their scenarios. They said San Antonio can clinch by winning out. Yes, of course. That's the easy way to do it. But if you're a Brahmas fan, you're watching both games on Saturday. You're obviously rooting for a St. Louis loss, but then you actually don't even need to beat Birmingham. You can afford to lose and still go into Week 10 with a shot at it. So that's what you want to root for as a Brahmas fan. That's the XFL side of it. The only clinching scenario would be the first one, Battlehawks win, Brahmas lose. Everything else, every other outcome advances us to that Week 10 showdown for who would get to host the XFL Conference Championship. So I hope that was clear. As far as the USFL side, weird situation. Birmingham 8-0, Michigan 6-2. So you're thinking, If Birmingham were to lose to San Antonio and Michigan to finish 8-2, Michigan would beat Houston this week, go on and beat Birmingham. They're also 8-2. So why are the Stallions automatically locked in? Well, it actually had nothing to do with tiebreakers. It had nothing to do with the rules. It just has the fact to do that the St. Francis Cabrini is hosting a festival inside of Ford Field on that weekend. So unfortunately, it's booked. They can't play there. So one seed goes to Michigan. They're still going to have to play in Birmingham. Now, the good news for Panthers fans, you had about a 0.01% chance of getting the one seed because you'd have to win out and you'd have to get the tiebreaker, which you're way behind in Birmingham's points for. You're right there with points against, but they've scored way more than you. So you would almost need miracles, them to basically be shut out against San Antonio, and then you would need to beat them by 2 or 3 touchdowns in Week 10. So either way, it probably wasn't happening. But we want to cover all the scenarios. The USFL title game is locked in Birmingham because of that scheduling conflict. So that's out the door. But for the XFL side, it'll get interesting. Now that that's all out of the way, why don't we go ahead and talk to Chris Payton-Jones of the Battlehawks. From Jacksonville, Florida to Lincoln, Nebraska, where he played his college ball with the Cornhuskers and a few NFL stops leading up to his signing with the XFL Seattle Sea Dragons and eventually drafted to the UFL, a cornerback for the St. Louis Battlehawks. Welcome to Springball Boulevard, Chris Payton-Jones. Thanks for joining us today, Chris.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, first off, man, I know you're a big gamer, right? So I got to ask, what'd you think of that new EA Sports college football video game trailer we dropped last week?
Man, I can't wait. I can't wait to play that. Can't wait to play the game. It's been a long time coming. I've been playing NCAA 14. I still got the game. I've been playing that forever, for the longest.
Same, man, same. I got to ask you, too, because you started your college career in 2014 with Nebraska, right? So that was the cutoff. Like, you were the last class to not have a game come out. So I'm sure how frustrating was that not to be able to play as yourself and have to create yourself?
Man, I was like, oh, bro, we just missed the mark. We just missed the mark.
Yeah. You missed NIL, too. That's something that after you graduated just happened. So you really missed the good college window. Huh?
Definitely did.
Yeah. All right, we'll get a little bit in your pro career now. Some trips to the NFL for about 4 years. Then you become a staple in spring football with that Seattle Sea Dragon defense last year in 2023. Take me through the time period of when you first found out that the merge was going down, Seattle wasn't going to make it, up until getting drafted with St. Louis.
When I found out that we wasn't the Sea Dragons, we wasn't gonna be there no more, I was just kind of like, dang, man, I wanted to get back with the guys again. And I know having that team back again in the same system for 2 years in a row, it was gonna be great. So it was kind of a bummer. And I told myself, like, there was only one team I really wanted to go to, and that was St. Louis. I just got so much respect and so much adoration for Coach Beck, especially like the day I lost my dad last year. That was the day that we played St. Louis, and he texted me after that game. And from that point on, I had so much respect for him. So I only wanted to play for one team. I'm glad I was able to, play with St. Louis this year.
Yeah, and I do want to say in my short time covering spring football with the XFL last year and the UFL this year, that was definitely one of the most inspiring stories that we've got to hear. And I appreciate you being so open about that story on a national audience, because I think things like that and your stories are what make this sport special and not just copy and paste from maybe other leagues. And that was really, really touching to hear about that. I know you're a creator as well in the multimedia space. You do a YouTube channel. You're a photographer. You're a videographer. You crank out great content. Where do you find time to do that stuff and also balance being a professional athlete? And how do you kind of combine both of those together?
I don't even know how I do it. I mean, I just try to. I remember at first when I first started, I was like trying to record so much at one time, and then trying to put it all together at one time. And I was like, man, this is time consuming. It's taken away from maybe more time that I could be in my playbook or, looking at film. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to just go through it during the week. That way I take piece by piece and then put it all together. And then by the time we go to a game and then I come home, it's easy to put the game time that I was away together with the stuff that I've already finished throughout the week, and then I'm able to push that out really fast.
Yeah, we definitely need stuff like that after Destroying went down and obviously had a full season of content planned for Day in the Life of UFL. It's cool to see you and some other guys step up and really show, hey, he might not be around anymore in the hub, but we still have guys in here that are documenting our lives and talking about and making YouTube videos. So I thought that was cool. We covered your background a little bit. I want to jump into the present. You're the top corner right now on the #1 pass defense in the league, and the numbers have been insane. You guys are only giving up about 150 yards a game. You have 8 picks, which leads the league as a unit. It's just been impossible to throw on you guys, and you had 2, as a secondary, 2 huge picks that swung the whole game against DC last week. What's working so well for this secondary?
Just us, everybody trusting each other and just playing together. We definitely had to respond to after we played Birmingham. Like we just didn't. I feel like we just didn't play together as a whole, not just the secondary, but just as a whole defense. We didn't play together. And once we play together, I mean, it's just unstoppable. Everybody is clicking on one accord. In the back with us in the secondary, we trust everybody. We trust our abilities, and we just go out there each and every day and just make plays, hold everybody accountable.
Yeah, you talk about playing together. It must be cool to play with guys like Quinterio Cole, Austin Fiolu, Antoine Jackson. How's it been like running it back with those guys that you played with last year?
Man, it's been great. Definitely being in the same room with those guys again. Like, it just makes it feel like, it's the Sea Dragons defense. It's not really, but I mean, it's just we all won now. We all are Battle Hawks now. I mean, last year was great, but now, I mean, we part of the Battle Hawks. We happy to be here, and we happy that we can contribute to this team.
Absolutely. And getting to the task at hand, Renegades this week. And you guys still have a lot to play for. You win out and you're 8-2, you'll get the entire playoffs at home. So this is the first week you really don't have to travel, right? What's that like for your preparation on kind of a short week? And does that help you recharge at all?
I mean, it feels good to not, you don't have to worry about traveling this week. It's definitely a short week. So, I mean, as far as like, everything is quicker. You have to be smart about what we're doing. As far as, what we're doing on the field, have to be smart about recovery and stuff like that. Like a lot of those things are sped up now. So now we have to, adjust to it, adjust to film, adjust to recovery, adjust to practice. Like everything is, it's much faster now.
Right. And Arlington did play well against you guys week 2. Any challenges that they present you defensively, maybe either specific matchups or what the overall focus has been in film this week?
I just know my focus is always, all the receivers. I mean, they have I feel like they have a great group of guys at receiver that can actually play and make plays. So, when that time comes, I mean, I just got to stay on one accord, make sure my technique is right, make sure we're all on one accord in the back end, and just put it all together.
Absolutely. We appreciate your time, Chris. Want to get one more in before we let you get back to work. You've been a part of 2 spring football playoff teams now these past 2 seasons. You've seen some success. This year, your season might not end until as late as June 17th. Are you thinking about getting back in an NFL training camp? And if so, how tough is it to stay locked in on the task at hand, winning a championship, when you know that UFL to NFL turnaround with training camp in July will be super quick?
I know it's gonna be super quick. I know it's gonna be a quick turnaround, but right now I'm just like I'm where my feet are right now. You have to be where your feet are. You just have to. I'm like I don't want to be too far ahead, and I got a team that I need to make sure I'm on point for, to make sure I'm at the top of my game, to give us the best chance, the best opportunities to win every week. So my focus right now is with my team and winning the championship right now.
That is Chris Payton-Jones. You can check out his YouTube channel. He has in his Instagram bio, Jack of all trades, which I think is fitting because he's cranking out some really good content for the UFL. If any of you fans out there want to see what a day in the life really looks like, he's got a ton of vlogs up about every process that he goes through throughout the week. And the best part about it, it's win or lose. He's not just putting up the good stuff. He's putting up the true day in the life, the challenges, the adversity, all of it from a UFL athlete. And that's what we need. Really appreciate your time, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Great stuff tonight with CPJ. I want to thank the Battlehawks PR team, Stully over there, for setting us up. Chris is a great player, really good content creator as well. Go check out his YouTube channel. You can follow him on Twitter as well. I think with Chris, it's more of like you see a guy who might not pop off the box score at you. It's because nobody's throwing his way, and he's also pretty highly rated when it comes to PFF and stopping the run. So he's an integral part of the number one pass defense in the UFL and a player who needs to get more NFL love. Don't think he landed on a roster after his time with the Sea Dragons last year, so this is his shot. As a 28-year-old corner, I think Chris Payton-Jones could be a fine asset to any NFL team, and that was a great chat with him. We do have some Sunday games to talk about. This is going to be our regional doubleheader on Fox, which means another pair of games at the same exact time. We're going to get a 75% to 25% breakdown on these two, with 25%, not surprisingly, getting this one. The Defenders at the Showboats, DC favored by 5 here. Total is at 46. Forecast for Memphis, 87 with some gusty winds. Could affect the passing game in this one. Slight chance of a storm as well. Let's start with the DC offense. Really, when you look at the only matchup of the weekend between non-playoff teams, what do you have to factor in when you're betting? Well, you have to factor in backups potentially seeing the field the same way we talked about with the Arlington Renegades this week. So you point to the top with Jordan Ta'amu. Will he start? Will they give Jalen McClendon the keys? We don't know officially yet, but I think Jordan will continue to start through the end of the season. I would not be surprised to see a little more Jalen McClendon, especially if this game gets out of hand in the second half. We saw Jalen down the stretch with the Vegas Vipers last season, and he played well. So this could be a spot for him to maybe get some reps, but I don't think Jordan is going away anytime soon. Outside of that, DC's offense should be business as usual because all the tight ends and receivers have sort of rotated snap counts throughout the season anyway, different workloads. I know some UFL teams, they stick to the starting 3 wide receivers, and then they got their tight end. It doesn't change. That has not happened in DC. They've had everybody start at least a game between the receivers, the tight ends, and even the running backs. They've been trying to feed the hot hand, so the lineup has really been all over the map for Fred Keiss personnel-wise. I am excited to watch Ty Scott again against this Memphis defense. Obviously, they are putrid against the pass. I mean, you're giving up 245 yards a game, so should be a chance for Ty Scott to put up some real numbers, and he just keeps getting better. Since they made the no-brainer decision to start him, and they also had Kelvin Harmon, their wide receiver 1, go down with an injury. Ty Scott breaking off 20 yards a catch this season. And he scored last week against St. Louis in the clutch. That pulled DC ahead before they surrendered the lead late. But I think Ty Scott is the difference, and he's a guy who can make a huge impact against a banged-up Memphis secondary in this game. Overall, you're seeing some of the highlights here if you're with us on YouTube and Twitter. I was impressed with the way DC moved the ball. This was a solid St. Louis defense that they were tasked to go against, and they played a lot better than they did back in week, 4, when they only scored 12 points. The first down passing game is what was really clicking for Fred Keiss. We didn't have a lot of the 3 yards and a cloud of dust up the middle on first down anymore. It seemed to me like they wanted to push it down the field on those first down opportunities. Now, the 2 interceptions were absolute game destroyers. They threw DC off script. They allowed St. Louis to capitalize on those turnovers. So you can't have that. But if DC's able to throw the ball like they did last week, this one could be over pretty quick. I just don't know at this point in the season what kind of effort to expect out of DC. Was that St. Louis game their last gasp of the 2024 season? And if so, again, is the staff going to throw some guys in there to get some reps that we wouldn't normally see. So I've been sort of back and forth this whole season, getting the right read on the defenders. I feel like I had a better pulse on them last season, maybe because they were winning. But this year, it's been back and forth. Last week, nailed it. I said they're going to cover against St. Louis. They covered. I said they're going to cover against Birmingham. They covered. I had them against San Antonio a couple weeks ago, money line at home. They win. But there were spots where I was completely off the mark on this team, and Zook let me hear about it. I had them pretty confidently on the money line against Michigan. Looked like they didn't get off the bus in that game. So I am going to go edge of the DC offense. I think they could score 25 to 30 on Memphis here in this game. Looking at the Memphis offense, another team where it's going to be an interesting week from a quarterback perspective because DC actually is missing two members of the starting secondary, Michael Joseph and safety Santos Ramirez, both not practicing this week. They've been staples of that defensive backfield really for the last 2 years under Greg Williams, some of his favorite guys. So could be an opportunity for whatever quarterback we do see here to take advantage of. I know Case Cookus and Troy Williams have both been limited in practice, both had their respective injuries the last 2 weeks. So I wouldn't be surprised if John DeFilippo calls up Josh Love, who did get some reps last week in Ford Field and looked solid in that second half, filling in for Cookus. It's kind of this theme, right, of third quarterbacks that were inactive all season in the UFL now getting a chance, and it seems to fire up the rest of the offense. Even though the talent might not be there, the spark that it provides is there, and they want to make the most of their reps. It also could be a bonus because defensive coordinators might not really know exactly what the threat is. When you look at the Memphis run game, Darius Victor, I mean, it's just not working, and we're going to get into that in a bit. So the load could be heavily on whoever quarterbacks Memphis here to throw it a ton. The offense, dropping the quarterback back on 66% of all snaps, that is mind-blowing, especially when you consider Birmingham, 50-50, Michigan, 50-50. That's where you want to be. Unless your offense is like the air raid, you want to have that run balance. They don't have it. Can't establish a run. Their defense isn't doing them any favors, of course, to set up the run, but it's really been a major reason why the Showboats have fallen to 1-7. The one thing Memphis has going for them in this spot is their postseason hopes were already out the door weeks ago. So they've been able to kind of process that disappointment of, okay, we're not as good as we thought we were. We're not making the playoffs. You know, that's kind of out of their system now. They can play loose. They have nothing to lose here. I think that's kind of what helped them give a really good fight to Michigan last week on the road is they just don't really – that's already out the door. Like, they're not going to be frustrated at this point that they've missed the playoffs when it's been 3 weeks of them knowing they were eliminated from the postseason. And Dawood Davis is going to be a problem for DC, as he has been with every secondary. He reminds me a lot of Jeff Badette, right? Great receiver, bad team, right? It's the same situation as Badette with the Vipers last season. 38 catches, 443 yards for Davis. I mean, he's second in the league in targets. So I think he presents a pretty big challenge for a DC defense that looked good last week. We had him at 94 passing yards allowed to St. Louis, again, without AJ McCarron. They did get 4 sacks, and they were 70% on third down, which is important to Greg Williams. I just think the defender's front has a significant advantage against this offensive line. Memphis has given up 36 sacks on the year. That's 4.5 a game. So I think they take some anger out on Memphis in this spot. It kind of much like Arlington did when they were 0-6. They had just freshly been eliminated from the playoffs, and they were looking to beat somebody down. I think that happens here with DC. Defenders are going to be the pick for me here. I really love the chance to get him at 5, too, because I think you go into this season, you're thinking DC is maybe 5 points as favored against the Showboats, but as the season went on, that separation grew, and that's why I'm taking them to win and cover.
I'm taking them to win. I'm not taking them to cover.
You know, I almost hate doing it, but I have talked myself into it because Memphis is so poor, and they're also poor against the spread. Now, they did cover last week against Michigan, so the odds makers might be looking at that, but, man, unless DC rests everybody, which I don't see them doing.
I think they win. Pre-show, we talked about it. As a Philly fan, I've seen some bad defenses, and I've seen them make not so good NFL quarterbacks look really good. And you're like, wow, breakout. And DC's defense reminds me of that. And I think whoever starts for Memphis may have a breakout game, but it's not going to be enough because their defense isn't good.
Yeah, right. I don't think DC's defense is quite as bad as you say they are. We could go on and on this all night, but I mean, they had an inspiring performance against St. Louis. They just couldn't keep them out of the end zone.
I
but
firmly
they were
remember.
close.
I firmly remember you saying something about me being right about DC last week.
Overall, yes. But you're giving me a layup here, right? If you can't cover 5 against Memphis, we are going to have a rough Sunday. And there might be some beverages being consumed. But I'm willing to ride or die with DC. I think they do win and cover. It probably should be closer to 6, 6.5. I'll take the 5. Let's wrap up the weekend with a USFL rematch. This is the Panthers at the Roughnecks. Michigan, a 3.5-point road favorite here. Total very low, sitting at 40. The forecast for H-Town is absolutely scorching. Listen to this. 96 and humid. And here's the problem. When you're starting your season at the end of March and over half of your teams are in the South, you're going to have these problems with hot weather. So if you're a Roughnecks fan heading out to this game to watch a 1-7 team, you might need a little more than just sunscreen to get through this one. But if you go, you deserve the UFL Fan of the Year award, and I can promise you when we do the Freshies, you will get that. You will get that reward because 96 and humid, probably going to be 150 degrees on that turf. Just terrible. So, last meeting between these two, a 34-20 Michigan victory. That was back in week 3. And EJ Perry was actually the trigger man for the Panthers back then. Now they've got 3 different ones at this point in the season. Danny Etling cleared and back in action. He's off the injury report. He had missed the last few weeks with that hand injury. Brian Lewerke and Bryce Perkins, in my opinion, stepped in just fine in his absence. The combo of those two able to lead Mike Nolan's squad to back-to-back wins. So if you are Coach Nolan this week, you got a big decision on your hands, and it'll be interesting to see what the quarterback rotation is. I guess I really wouldn't be surprised to see a combination of Danny Etling and Bryce Perkins, right? It's kind of what I'm leaning towards. Do that for 2 weeks before the USFL championship game, and then I think at that point, playing against Birmingham with your season on the line in the USFL championship game, that's when you want to decide on one player. I don't think you play both. I think Michigan would be better off deciding these next 2 weeks who it's going to be against Birmingham, which my vote goes to Bryce Perkins, but we'll see what happens the next 2 weeks. Quarterback really isn't the only position that Michigan has rotated a lot of guys at. Running back was one of those, but with the loss of Wes Hills, Matt Colburn really becomes that workhorse in the backfield. Interested to see how much they use him here because, again, brutal heat. You're going to have guys cramping up left and right. I mean, turf temperature is going to be boiling point. So I think the smart move for the Panthers, activate all 3 tailbacks. You got Colburn, you got Nate McCrary, and you got Toa Taua. So try to manage that load and give all 3 guys carries because you cannot afford to lose Matt Colburn to injury, especially with what happened to Wes Hills. This is the most successful part of the Michigan offense has been running the ball. They've done it just super effectively, and, it's been Colburn the last couple weeks. I think he had 94 last week, had a couple games over 100 yards before that, but Wes Hills is going to hurt this team because you don't have somebody to come in and pace Colburn. Nate McCrary will certainly have to step up, and you might hear something from that Nate McCrary coming up here soon on some of the things that he could do. We might have a contributor on the show that could tell you a little bit about McCrary, not to tease too far into it. But, yeah, as far as the Roughnecks defense, I do expect them to play a little better in this game than the one you're seeing right now from back in week 3. Michigan dropped 34 in that game. I think the Roughnecks defense holds them to maybe mid-20s. I mean, they weren't able to make enough stops to ultimately win the game against Birmingham when it was a very different type of game for Houston. Usually it's their defense giving them a chance to win at the end and the offense flops. This time it was the opposite. The offense actually had given the Roughnecks a chance to win that game down the stretch, and their defense ended up flopping, giving up 35 points to Birmingham and 5 for 5 inside the red zone. So, if you're the Panthers, I don't know how much you're going to be scoring in this game. Like I said, mid-20s, and your total's low, which usually isn't a good sign for offense. And like I said, I guess really guys on both sides of the ball will be cramping up. We know Jake Bates actually missed a 51-yard field goal last week that would have got Zook the cover for Michigan. They also dropped a 3-point conversion. So there was some, mistakes and miscues from the offense, but I think Danny Etling coming back will help shore some of those things up. Let's look at Houston offensively. We know head coach C.J. Johnson was impressed by the performance of quarterback Nolan Henderson, who shared the snap count with Reed Sinnett last week. C.J. told the media he would actually like to see Henderson start if he's healthy. Remember, he went down on a fumbled snap in that game against Birmingham. So we'll see. I think it could be a great opportunity for Henderson to go in there and possibly lead the Roughnecks to their first conference win. I don't love the spot for the Michigan defense. They are potentially missing their sack leader in Breland Speaks. He is on the injury report. When you're going against a guy like Mark Thompson, who showed you what he could do last week, that could be a problem. But the good news for the Panthers, they should get star safety Kai Nakua back. And they added a linebacker in free agency by the name of Bumper Pool. I think that's going to automatically be Zook's favorite player. Bumper Pool is this guy's name. He's the leading tackler in Arkansas history. He actually played with Jake Bates for the Razorbacks. So look for him to be a potential Frank Ginda replacement. You want a hard-nosed linebacker in there with that sort of mentality. I think Bumper Pool. I can't say that enough. That is a phenomenal name. Bumper Pool. Sheesh, I love the UFL, man. So otherwise, like I said, not too confident on just the entire Michigan Panther operation this week. I think for them it's really just survive, right? The next 2 games. You don't want to have any major injuries. You want to be able to dump all your focus into that USFL title game. For Houston, coming off their best offensive performance, over 300 total yards, like we said, got Mark Thompson going. He had almost 5 yards a touch. They were 8 of 15 on third down. That was very good. They had over 11 yards per pass completion. They were 3 for 4 in the red zone. So you could go through weeks of Houston offensively and try to combine 3 games, and you wouldn't get that total output from last week. So they completely blew my under bet out of the water, and my natural reaction to that would be, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and hop on board with the over 40, but I don't know. It just feels like a stay away to me, maybe a little half-unit sprinkle if you're feeling frisky. I think maybe we get a 22-20 here, so you'll be sweating out the over, but coming off a pretty inspiring performance against Birmingham, against a team with really nothing but pride left to play for in Michigan, the Roughnecks are going to be the pick for me. It's probably the first time I've gone with them. I think it definitely is the first time I've gone with them all season. I just feel like we have 4 road favorites this week. One of them's going to go down, so pick one. This is the most likely one.
Bumper Pool.
Bumper Pool. I think is that a sport?
It is. So The reason
It's like bowling. Like it's like you
set
put
it up.
bumpers on your pool table.
There's an 8 ball in my logo. If you haven't seen it, I started production doing pool, so that's why he's saying it hits home for me, and I do
Bumper
like
pool.
it.
That's a legit name, man.
it's sweet.
Especially for a linebacker. Like,
oh,
how
yeah.
would you just like to get sacked by bumper pool? I think that as a quarterback, that would make me cry. And speaking of crying, John DeFilippo. But
all right, so back to the game. I think you're crazy. I'll take Michigan.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I know you're higher on them than I am. Listen, this isn't a knock on Michigan. They could afford to lose this game and
Sure,
because
like you said, it doesn't really mean
Yeah.
anything. So if Houston wins, does that mean Michigan sat some people? I don't know.
Right.
Houston does have a good D. I'm not disrespecting them that much. And Henderson did look good.
Yeah.
I think this is closer than everybody thinks, but Michigan pulls it off.
Yeah. Remember, Michigan, 6 out of their 8 games so far in air conditioning. This is going to be brutal. And I was down in Houston last year for our Boulevard Bowl tour. It was like 89 that day, and the turf was like 130. So now it's going to be 99 at kickoff. That is ridiculous. And I know the Panthers practice outside, but it is way hotter in Houston than it is in Dallas.
That
this
IV
week.
crew is going to be busy.
I can't believe it. I'm thinking about the
Cramp
sideline
City?
reporter, Jake Butt. I mean, he might as well go shirtless for the entire game. That's going to be brutal, man. So, yeah, this is a week where San Antonio is happy that they have the Alamo Dome. And speaking of that, those 3 out of 4 games in Texas this weekend, thankfully, we're heading to the only one that's going to be inside. I don't need sunscreen and a wet towel to survive this one. Our 2024 Battle of the Brands Tour back on the road in the Alamo City. It's my first trip back since the XFL 2023 championship game, which was a treat. It's the unbeaten Stallions against the playoff-bound Brahmas, and it's the first ever Alamo Dome yellow out. So it's going to pretty much look like a sponge convention in the Alamo Dome. I'm not sure what to expect. The seats are blue there, so maybe a little bit of a contrast idea, but a yellow out. Wow.
Is SpongeBob making an appearance?
I hope Wade Phillips just comes out in yellow pants. I want yellow zip and yellow pants.
This is the time. Remember the Super Bowl? And we were watching the
SpongeBob
broadcast on the second TV, and they were great. So hopefully Patrick shows up too.
I love it. This is how you draw eyeballs, right, to the UFL. But yeah, I was looking forward to tailgating outside, and then I checked the weather app, and I found out it's going to be 105 degrees at kickoff in San Antonio. So the Bulls on parade, great fan base for the Brahmas. They travel everywhere. Hope to catch them inside the dome, because I can tell you right now, I'm getting out of my car and going right into the air conditioning. I am not walking laps around the Alamo Dome. So if you're going to be there Saturday, say hello. XFL and USFL knotted up at 7 in this Battle of the Brands series. So this will go a long way in deciding who comes out on top, and it might end up being decided in the championship game. All right, let's get on to best bets of the week. I'm going to start it off with the over in the Stallions and Brahmas game. Again, I think AJ Smith is always a fun bet when you're looking at an over. I think that this total is too low in the mid-40s, and I do respect both defenses. It could turn into a defensive slugfest, but again, you look at kind of the games in the series between Stallions, Brahmas, Battlehawks. Brahmas and Battlehawks 31-24. Brahmas and or Stallions and Battlehawks 30-26. We've just been getting high-scoring games between the best teams in the league. I think this is going to be one of them. Got the over 44. I'm also going to go ahead and lock in San Antonio at plus 8.5. Just a massive spread here. We are overreacting from an odds maker standpoint to the Stallions. They should not be an 8.5-point favorite. I think San Antonio will lose, but do enough to cover. And if they win the game, hey, that's even better for us. Then we really nailed it. I'm also going to go DC -5 against Memphis.
That's at if we get that San Antonio win, XFL baby.
We want to cut. We want to go to 8-7 in that game, and then hopefully DC doesn't blow it. DC might have the chance of the whole XFL on their shoulders if San Antonio wins.
I don't
on
like
Saturday.
your DC -5. I already told you. DC wins it by a field goal.
Oh, come on.
I'm just saying. I don't
We
like.
need a 5-0 week. You should be rooting against me.
I'm not rooting
What, are you
against
betting
you.
on Memphis this week?
I'm
Crazy?
not. No, I'm not rooting against you. I'm just telling you how I feel.
Is that TPG I see on the screen?
Oh, do we have a new?
Oh, okay.
We got a new better on the Boulevard.
Surprising me a bit this week. So, the People's Gambler has earned himself a best bet. It only took him 9 weeks to do so, but we put him on the board. Now, some may be asking, well, is this just because Zook didn't want to make 2 plays, or are we actually trusting TPG? If you ask me, I trust him. I think he can help us get a 5-0 week. I don't hate the play. I hate the Memphis defense, so, but it worked for you last week. You were on the under with them, so
It did.
maybe he's taking a page out of your book there, Zook.
I like it. I don't hate it at all.
Yeah, anything that involves less points with DC, you love. So hopefully we can cash both and do some kind of weird double cover there. But what is your best bet this week, sir?
I'm taking over 46 St. Louis and Arlington. I like it a lot, and you're right. TPG did get a bet because, listen, folks, I'm sick of being under 500. Last year, what made me successful at 7-3 regular season was I took 1 bet a week.
Yeah.
And I did my homework. I did my research. This is a stone cold lock. And it will get me to 500. So TPG, you are welcome for my second slot in the best bets.
Go out there. I want to see 41-31 between St. Louis and Arlington. Let's just score the most points at any game all season. We
We'll
need a
take it.
5-0 week, and I think bringing TPG on board can do just that. Speaking of the People's Gambler, he's also back with a DFS segment for Week 9.
Stardom, Ricky Person. Person has been the absolute X factor for the Birmingham offense, accounting for 446 all-purpose yards this season. Even though he hasn't found the end zone since Week 6, he still leads the league with 6 rushing touchdowns, and I believe this is the week he finds pay dirt once again. Birmingham's run game will simply be too much for Wade Phillips and the Brahmas defense to handle, as Ricky will be running all over the Alamo Dome this Saturday afternoon. Start Ricky Person. Sit him, Sal Cannella. Friend of the show, Sal Cannella, got the Boulevard bump last week as he caught 9 passes for 87 yards and a touchdown. But his 3-game scoring streak will come to an end this week as he faces off against a Battlehawks defense who ranks number 1 against the pass. I'm sorry, Sal. As a Chicago native myself, I hate to do this to you, bud, but it's just not in the cards this week for you to get her done. Sit Sal Cannella. Sleeper, Nate McCrary. With the recent injuries to Wes Hills, McCrary moves into the RB2 spot for the Panthers, who are the second best rushing team in the league. But don't let DK fool you. McCrary is listed as out only because he was on the bottom of the depth chart and inactive the past 2 weeks due to non-injury related circumstances. Rostering McCrary is highly valuable for your DFS lineup this week, especially at the price of $4K, as Michigan has averaged 27 rushing attempts per game this season. Sleeper, Nate McCrary.
So the People's Gambler is from Chicago? We learn something new every day here, Zook. I thought he was from Vegas. I thought he grew up in Sin City.
No comment.
Well, he's back with a 3-pack for DFS. Interesting this week. I think Ricky Person is always a solid play. We talked about Nate McCrary in that Michigan preview. The Panthers get running the ball a lot. He could certainly see some carries, and he's only 4K. Plus, he's got the out designation. So if you're in a tournament, some people just might stay away from him. I like where TPG is going this week.
So do I. I love it. But buyers beware of his sleeper.
There's your disclaimer from an always confident Chris Zook propping up the rest of the bowl.
I'm just saying. History.
Yeah.
History.
Well, he hit a couple. Maybe he'll hit one more before we wrap up the regular
I'm still
season.
team TPG.
Yeah, if you're a backup running back at 4K, I think even like 9 or 10 points would qualify as a hit there. So we did have the before we get out of here, we had the unveiling of the UFL Championship Trophy. We don't have a picture for you, but go ahead and head over to the United Football League on social media, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, whatever, to take a look at the picture. It's a lot like the logo. So if you know the kind of the bracketed football-shaped UFL logo, that's a lot what it looks like. And I thought it's pretty clean. It's got a silver look to it, and it's not as wacky as the XFL Championship Trophy last year. So curious for people's thoughts on that. But it's crazy to think, Zook, we are just, 3 weeks away or 4 weeks away at this point. I think it's 3 weeks from the UFL Championship game in St. Louis. I'm curious to see how many fans will, maybe just tune in for the playoffs and then be like, why is a 11-0 team on the road for the championship? That's going to be a funny storyline when people don't realize that was a pre-selected game. So hopefully some of the casuals will tune into Springball Boulevard and learn everything they need to know about the UFL playoffs. If you're out there, one of our diehard viewers, we can't thank you enough for joining us throughout this whole ride. We have a lot of shows left that we're not slowing down yet. We're going to have an award special again. We got a ton of content coming up for Week 10 and the playoffs. So now's the time to show a friend, tell a friend, get them involved. I know we still got conference finals going on with the NBA and the NHL. We got the Indy 500 coming up. So it's a big time in the sports calendar yet again. But when the playoffs start going, we're going to have a couple great matchups. So tell your friends. They're going to want to get invested in this and pick a team before it's too late. For the People's Gambler and the producer, director, and owner of Studio Z, Chris Zook, I'm Matty Fresh. You always remember, there is no such thing as football season. We'll see you Sunday night for a recap.